The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Welcome to DurianASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. Now you are at the second program of our DurianASEAN breakfast call show, the Durian Heat. Today we will be sharing and discuss about the corruption and transparency. Well, how well do you know about corruption and transparency when we talk about in Malaysian context? And where do you think the fine line is? And we have invited these three people, and one is Jessica Secrombe, Senior Manager of TI-Malaysia, Wong, TI-Malaysia's Youth Representatives, and also Director of Business Development in AIESEC. And lastly, we have Saddiq Syde, who is Champion Regional Debater, debating in the youth debate organized by TI-Malaysia. Good morning.
Morning.
Right, so how are you all? Good?
Feeling good. Yeah.
Yeah, so are you ready to start this conversation and / debate today?
Debate, yes, definitely.
Okay. So let's start with Jessica. Could you tell us about your background and then what you do?
Sure. So I'm the Senior Manager of Transparency International Malaysia. I joined them about a year and a half ago, but I've been with Transparency International Movement as a whole for about 2 years now. Mm-hmm. Previously I was in Cambodia working with the chapter there, and then the Secretariat in Berlin. That's where I started. But I guess I kind of fell into the corruption thing just through my experience of working for charities in Cambodia on indigenous rights and natural resource management, and that kind of just led me into the path of being an anti-corruption activist, I suppose, in a nutshell.
How about you, May?
I'm currently studying in Monash University. I'm doing a business degree, majoring in economics and finance. I'm actually in my final semester. So I'm also very active in AIESEC, one of the largest non-profit youth organization. So I've always been actively involved in conferences and things like how to build a better future, self-development. So I think how I fell into this corruption part of thing is more towards because AIESEC is a partner of TI-Malaysia. So, and then through TI-Malaysia, I was selected to go for the International Youth Camp at Siem Reap, Cambodia. And then from there, it was quite interesting to see how other ASEAN countries actually looks up to Malaysia, that they think that our corruption level is actually not as bad as theirs. And then it made me realize that they had it even worse than us. So then they were showing about how their youths over there were so active and trying to make the country a better place. So I was thinking, okay, so as a student, so maybe I should, play a part and do something better for the country as well.
Wow, that sounds so motivating.
I know. Too much motivation camp and like self-leadership camps.
How about you?
got selected.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
Too much.
How about you, Saddiq?
I'm a fourth-year law student in International Islamic University of Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a part-time lecturer in IIUM as well. But usually people describe me as a part-time student and full-time debater.
Whoa.
Because that's my passion. I dedicate my life to it.
That suits you.
That's obvious.
But besides that, I've also been called up to conduct seminars and also debate training programs in more than 15 countries. Recently I came back from China, Pakistan and Qatar. And over there, even a lot of the people there and the citizens there primarily look up to our country. Obviously there are benefits and pros and cons of how we deal with corruption, but generally, comparatively to the position of other countries in Asia, we're still there. We're still good enough. And I think all three of us are in agreement that...
Agreement, wow.
Or maybe I'm just like unilaterally speaking on behalf of them.
Exactly.
That we are all anti-corruption, and one of the biggest driving factors as to why I decided to join this event is to also hopefully set a message to the youth, not only in Malaysia but around Asia, to ensure that all of us collectivize to go against corruption, because as long as we do not speak up or become vocal about it, it becomes something which is intergenerational, it becomes a vicious cycle.
Right.
But the point in which we collectivize, we can definitely change that trend which has existed for quite a while.
So that comes with a lot of questions here. Jessica, could you explain us about the TI-Malaysia as well as what's the role and objectives of that?
Sure. Well, Transparency International, like I mentioned earlier, is a movement. It's a global movement worldwide, and there are about 100 chapters plus around the world, of which TI-Malaysia is one of them. So we have a very optimistic and vast vision, which is a nation free of corruption, which rightly Meiwa and Saddiq have said is something that can only be done collectively, particularly with the younger generation and the youth. Now we need to mobilize and engage them more. So that's very much a core part of our strategy, is people engagement, citizen engagement, raising awareness, and it should be driven by those that are individuals that are concerned and can pave the way as agents of change. But we also engage with other stakeholders and institutions such as the corporate sector, government, forestry departments as well, looking at integrity issues, where there are weaknesses that lie in certain systems that we can work with them to improve, and also lobby for policy reform. That's also a strong part of what TI does.
Do you want to add something? It looked like as if you wanted to add something.
We're not here to rebut one another.
Okay.
Save that for next week.
Agree among each other.
Right. My next question is perhaps to May.
Okay.
What is your definition of corruption and transparency?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Oh, you have a paper.
There's the official TI definition.
All right.
But then
I'll probably
you can you can
yeah,
actually
I'll just
explain
read the
further.
ones TI defines.
Sure.
So TI defines corruption as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. So it can range from bribery, extortion, fraud, nepotism, and all that jazz. And transparency is exactly what it says on the tin. So it's like so it's like openness, accountability, honesty. I think for me, corruption, it's something that it takes away what the public should have, and it deteriorates someone's welfare. That's how I see corruption. And for me, transparency is more of like clear cut, exactly like what the definition is about, openness and honesty. Because let's not talk about transparency in international level, even transparency among a team, which is like, for example, because I'm currently hosting one of a summit for like the students with AIESEC. AIESEC has a lot of work, so yeah. So even then, we could see that when there's no transparency among departments, it leads to, so it's not a big problem, but it sort of jeopardize our work and things like that, because we don't know what other departments are doing, and they don't know what we are doing. So there's no transparency among each other. So if for such a small summit, it causes such a crisis, what happens when it's about international level? So that's how I see it. Like, transparency is basically informing and no information asymmetry, like how public doesn't know what's happening. Like, like our informations are all out of the place. Like, we can't, like, we have different sources, and then
So
we don't know which sources are actually
does that mean that
true and things
transparency
like
also comes with communication, two-way communication?
It's right to know as a citizen.
that. Exactly.
How about you, Saddiq? Do you want to edit and add more to her points?
Of course. This is where I'll implicitly rebut them.
Whoa.
No, I mean, I'm obviously, like, as a youth, and also as a student as well,
Right.
I'm not going to follow the conventional form of defining corruption, but I think, as May rightfully pointed out, usually transparency and the definition of corruption are interlinked with one another. So usually, a lot of Asians would point out that why are Western countries pointing fingers to us, yet in Western countries, daylight corruption happens on a daily basis, but to them and to us, daylight corruption means lobbying upon government, where corporations are allowed to actively lobby by using their money upon corporations. But this is where my personal feelings comes in as well, where, to me, as long as politicians and public figures disclose what they are doing towards the public, and the public agrees and can vote them in or out based on the decisions which they make, that's something which is legitimate. But the problem which we face especially is that a lot of issues are hide.
You mean the
under
we,
carpet.
as in like in Malaysia?
Yeah,
or?
I can't generalize everyone,
Right.
but generally, corruption, especially centralized to Asia, primarily things which happen under the blanket, the point in which we do not disclose it becomes much harder for the public to hold politicians or public figures to account.
And that actually creates a bigger gap between the public and the government, especially, right? And then, as me, as also foreigner, that's what I've been observing here in Malaysia as well. So let's go to the event that will be held on the 25th of April. So anyone who would like to explain about the event, please?
Well, like you said, 25th of April, Taylor's College is one of our supporters as well. Lakeside Campus, 2 to 5 p.m. But there's a very interesting story in how this debate
Please
came
share
about
with
and
us.
the
Yes.
premise of it. And I will hand that over to our youth ambassador, Mewa, who's got the background story. And then
Right.
I'll move on to Saddiq's role. So,
Sure.
Rebut me.
rebut you, yeah.
Basically, because I wasn't the only one who represented Malaysia for the International Youth Camp. So there's one guy, Nick, who is an auditor in Deloitte, and then there's one Ken, who is actually doing medicine in IMU. So yeah,
from the
so
different
pretty
backgrounds.
very
Yes.
different backgrounds,
Yeah.
and probably it's a good way because like we could see how corruptions and transparency are happening. You know?
And also different
Yeah.
point of views,
Yes,
right?
exactly. So what we did was we were thrown. Okay, we weren't really thrown into the camp, but we were given like this specific time where we had to come up with a country initiative.
Oh.
Yeah, so you're thinking, oh my gosh, so if we do not come up with it, what happens? Do we not go back to Malaysia? Do
Yes,
we stay
that's
in
exactly
Siem
what was
Reap?
gonna happen.
Well, I don't mind actually, but oh well. So then what we did was, because it has to be sustainable, and at the same time it has to be feasible, and also it has to be replicable. So that's a tough one for us, but we were thinking, we wanted to do something very direct and physical, where instead of just using social media, where
Right.
like that's like a social media in between me and someone else who's reading it, we wanted something that is direct among the crowds and things like that. So then we came up with, why not host a debate competition? Because Malaysia has this Malaysia Public Policy competition, where people come up in groups and then they discuss about the policies that should be implemented or policies that they want to implement
Right.
and things like that. So then it was quite interesting to hear what youth has to say, like what sort of policy they think is actually right. So then we were thinking, okay, you know what, maybe we should do a debate event, because looking at our amount of resources, like the people that can handle it, like the people there to actually do it, we were like thinking, okay, a debate event would be more feasible, and it's actually easy to replicate as well for other countries, because we are expected to replicate other countries' initiatives. So like probably next year we'll do something like what Vietnam is doing, Humans of Integrity. Yeah, and Indonesia.
How is it conducted there in Vietnam?
Because for Vietnam, they said that their social media, the usage of their social media is really high, so it's easy for them to actually gain access to like tap into publics and like those markets, like students and everything. So that's why it's easy for them to do this human integrity, because they got the inspiration from Humans of New York. Yeah, so they capture a photo of someone, and then probably that person will share a story about good governance, integrity, and transparency. So then we felt like, okay, the debate might work, but thankfully for MIDP actually, that we managed to pull in a lot of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
It's another one of our supporters, which we would also really like to thank Malaysian Institute for Debate and Public Speaking, who have put up with our continuous requests and deliberations
And
about how to
demands.
really grasp our objective,
Right.
and they've been fantastic support.
Because
which is-
if without them, we wouldn't have gotten the debaters as well, because we don't really know where to start.
That's true.
Because the ironic part is, the 3 youth representatives who are hosting this debate event does not know how to debate, has not debated, and has not hosted an event. And we're basically we're really trying our luck on it. Because when we asked each other, have you guys debated? And we're like, no, we haven't done that before, but we're doing it. Oh no.
Hopefully we won't let you down.
Yeah. Like even Jazz was like, have you guys debated? We're like, no, like motions. At first I was like, what motions?
It's a whole other world, and it's actually, this is a great experience and
Yeah.
insight for us, because we just didn't realize there's this whole underworld of
Yeah.
etiquette and insight and just terminology.
Yeah, like when
Right.
when we met up with Matt, who's the person in charge at MIDP, he was talking to us about chief adjudicators, the motions, and this, and then British parliamentary style, Asian
Right.
British something, and things
then-
like that. And I'm like, okay.
There are a lot of questions
Like,
from
and then
our side.
Then
Let's just
we
put it that way.
realized, like, okay, this is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
just a debate competition.
This is a lifestyle,
Yeah.
right?
It
It
is.
is. It really is a lifestyle. So
Crazy.
MIDP has spearheaded the debate development, especially among the youth in Malaysia. So, I mean, that's definitely something which I personally would like to advocate for, to ensure that debating happens not only on a weekly basis, but on a daily basis, not only among the youth, but also among politicians as well, so that they become more active. And also, like, for this event, I think Transparency International, in collaboration with MIDP, have also were able to assemble, I think, the top 6 debaters in Malaysia. And I think if you were to look at the Malaysian track record in the World University Debating Championship, which is supposed to be like the flagship of debating tournaments across the world, where we meet up with debaters from Cambridge, Oxford, and Harvard. And currently Malaysia, I think some of the debaters who will be debating are the world record holder and also the top, like, I think there's 2 debaters who are in the top 10 in the World University Debating Championship, the current champion of Asia, the record holder of Asia, and obviously national champions as well. So
it should be highlighted for sure, you know.
and
people should know about this, yeah.
So that's something which definitely we would like to contribute upon. So usually people always perceive that debaters will keep on arguing, but we do not make an impact. I think this is definitely one of the events where we want to make an impact and to contribute back to the public, not only by arguing, but actually arguing by using substance and hopefully changing people's mind towards a betterment.
So when it comes to debate, can somebody actually explain further on how it is usually conducted? And then is there any moderator or somebody who filters any vulgar words?
Ready. Look at him on the edge.
Right.
I'll pick the interesting part. So usually the toughest part of debating is that it compels us to read up on every single issue which you can think of. We'll debate about assuming that we can colonize Mars, like what should human beings do, to pop culture, like debating about Justin Bieber, towards the most heaviest of topics like should the United States invade Syria, or debating about transparency and also about corruption as well. So we debate about a range of issues, and we're only given 15 minutes to prepare on the topic before to speak. And obviously you can't refer to the internet, so that means that all debaters must be well read. So if you look back into the event which Transparency International is hosting, it's that so when a topic is given, all the six of us must prepare on it. But I think at the end, the goal is still a common one, is to ensure that the public is informed about corruption and to ensure that people know about it. So even though we are on different sides, it doesn't mean that after the debate we'll hate one another, we'll look at one another derisively. We're still friends, but the point is that debating acts as a platform to allow us to inform the public about what our views are in the most conducive way possible.
Wow, thank you so much.
That's a very important point. Sorry about this. The objective of this actual debate, and we're thinking about it when we were talking about this initiative. It's to really, bottom line, create an open platform to empower the youth to discuss these issues openly, freely, fairly, and in a non-violent environment. I mean, track record of the context we're living in, there are constraints, there are in every country, but there's no issue to get a dialogue started, to at least, whatever side you stand on, at least make sure that there's that space and it's open.
So this very fortunate, I was a fortunate table for everyone to join for this special event, which will be held on the 25th of April. And please remind me to remind our audience about this event again by the end of this session. Okay? So, so we'll take a short break.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Welcome back to DurianASEAN, and you are still with all these 3 beautiful people in the house. Let's say good morning to them again. How are you guys? All right? So far, okay? Okay. So my next question to you, all of you, and you can actually speak out whenever you guys are ready. What are the youth concerns in Malaysia generally, and also what has been done to fight all these corruptions and transparency so far? So who can start?
I think as a youth, I think one of our biggest concerns definitely is rampant corruption, primarily because our future is obviously destroyed or decimated at the point in which corruption becomes something which is prevalent. And also usually, the youth today, we do not have a ceiling of demand. We always want to be the best, we always want to improve on past generations and what have you. But the point in which corruption becomes a standard, it strips us away of our future. It definitely decreases our quality of living. But more importantly, the point in which corruption becomes something just rampant and transparent, it means that we have something to compare ourselves to. Whenever we see a person who might be corrupted, we'll think, wow, I could have lived a better life. But the reason why I couldn't is because, not necessarily because of my failure, but it's because that person or that entity stripped me away of my opportunity. So definitely now, especially in the IT, social networking world, we can vocalize our concerns a lot more. And this is where I slightly move into one of the best solutions to it, believe it or not, is actually social networking sites. So like, and the youth, and I would, as I've actively encourage everyone to all the forums which I've been through across the world, is that the youth must be more vocal, especially on social networking sites. Because the point in which we create a culture in which people know that all these versions of corruption are intolerable, it creates like it's a positive way of a herd mentality, where people will start to realize, yep, anything to do with corruption, I will abhor it. The problem is the point in which we are not vocal. We don't necessarily have to be complicit in corruption, but the point in which we omit fulfilling our duty to vocalize our concerns, it means that the point in which we're quiet, people who are corrupted will always remain at the top and will always win. So generally, like corruption is like it's a bad culture. The point in which people don't stop it, it will just like continue and will not stop. So it's like game theory. The point in which I am not corrupted, I will be put at a disadvantage as a consequence. I would need to be corrupted as well. So that's why you need to block that culture completely before other people are forced to co-opt into it, because corruption is the only way in which I could become successful, or as people would term it, it is the conduit of success. And to strip that away so that people realize that corruption is not the way in which you succeed, it's actually effort, passion, and hard work. So I think, just to summarize here, I personally believe the point in which we vocalize our concerns and our concerns overwhelm the current culture of corruption. That's one of the best ways in which the youth can impact the ability to stop corruption at a national scale.
Right. So you talked about how the corruption can actually lead and the result of corruption. But how about May? Why do you think it is the cause of corruption? You mentioned it shortly before in the first segment, but can you continue with that also with the question that I just asked?
Okay. For me, the cause of corruption is like a built-up culture, because one person did it, and because the person, like from a public view, when you see that one person did it, he managed to get what he wants, and he actually got out of it. Like, he wasn't caught. So it's like a built-up culture where it's like a chain theory kind of thing, like a reaction where if I follow his footsteps and I do what he does and I can get what I want, why not? So that's why it happens and it keeps happening. So for me, it's what are the youth's concern in terms of corruption? I think it's more of like, their concern is more of like, will it ever end? Like, how will this thing actually ever end? And like, even for like our past GE election, everyone was disappointed. Like, they would be thinking, is there actually no way? Like, is there even any democracy? And
You mean it's completely hopeless?
Yeah, is it completely? Yeah, like they felt like, is there actually no other way? Like, with the rallies going on and having people to fight against corruption, but then they still see the same thing happening. So I guess it's more of their concern is, will the corruption in Malaysia ever end? And
Well, thank you for bringing that up. Actually, we've had a few strikes, rallies, and the movements here, but then they sort of fade away after some time.
Yes,
They don't
exactly.
sustain the movement for a long time. There's no such thing as long-term movement in Malaysia. That's based on my observation. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what are the things that you can actually, sustain or, lengthen all this movement?
So they are definitely
Especially from the youth perspectives.
pretty sure Jessica also
Yeah.
feels
Yeah.
unhappy
Perhaps
as
it's
well.
Jessica's
Gen
turn.
Y.
A few more years. Thank you, Saddiq. Very opposite comments. So to hear that brings me back into the youth. I think that's a very good question, Grace, and particularly in terms of engaging the younger generation. I mean, we're all busy. We all have short spans of attention as well. Even myself, that sometimes you can feel so overweighted by these issues. But like they both have said, if you have a passion and general concern, it's something that will forever kind of be there in your everyday life and everyday action. And that is where you as an individual have a role to influence, impact, or just engage others around you. And it starts off like that, through the individual and through your interaction with others. So discussing the youth concerns, I think, this holistic issue, corruption, grand scale, very, very pressing, but it's also important to bring it down to everyday life and experience too. So in the context of Malaysia, roadblocks are always an issue I think everyone can relate to. Driving schools, every time I talk to students or young people, this is the driving test issue of being asked for a bribe. Comes up constantly.
Right, I've heard a few cases as well, yeah.
I had it myself and had a very interesting experience where I was told, you will no doubt be asked to pay a bribe. And I was like, okay, fair enough, that'll be interesting. That will test my role in this job and being here. And sure enough, I was asked the day before my lesson, and my test, sorry. And so he said to me, are you going to take the normal test or the other test?
The special test.
Wow, which driving school is this?
No comment. But and so I said, well, I didn't even know there was an alternative test. Please enlighten me. And he says, there's so much for this route, so much for that route, and if you make a mistake, you won't fail. So my comment was, oh, you mean like a bribe? And his reaction was, no, it's not like a bribe, it is a bribe.
Oh, wow. What kind of answer is
threw
that?
me off, and I was like, fantastic. It's so blatant that I was stupid in asking. Please clarify. So with that, I engaged in a discussion with him, and I said, why does this come to light? And he says, you know what, it's a supply and a demand thing. Our clients actually feel like they don't have the time to fail and the money to keep paying. So it's a two-sided matter. So just talking, we have talks, we go to talks with colleges and talk to students there, and just talking to them about this and kind of just gauging them about the fact that this shouldn't be normal. Don't take this as an option just through convenience. You're exacerbating the situation. It's prevalence by thinking it's
Then how about from the driving schools itself? What are they going to do? I mean, they will just keep on doing things to them.
So the point in which there's a demand, it will never stop. So it's a two-side problem.
And it gets very annoying because it's really obvious, like in your face, that if you don't pay, you fail. Because I didn't take I didn't give bribes for my driving.
So you
and
went
I
for
really
the normal test.
Yeah, I really failed like the first one, and I even failed the road one where people usually don't fail. And everyone was like, why did you even fail? I was like, I don't know. So do you even know how to drive? I was like, yeah, I did. Like, I know how to drive. And then like the second time, I didn't want to give as well. So, but I passed.
That's one of the biggest problems with corruption in general, is that the point in which that becomes a culture, it creates a perverse incentive for the driving instructors to fail people.
Exactly.
Because now it will compel them indirectly to pay. At the same time, incentivize them to fail genuinely good candidates. And the other problem is the point in which that becomes a culture, the point in which she relays information to others and others and others, and the point in which it's so blatant, it becomes much harder for a genuinely truthful person like me to opt out from that system, because then, according to assuming another person whose moral conscience is slightly weaker, be like, but other people are doing it as well. I can just
Why
start
can't
them
you do
off.
it? Yeah.
That's the thing that Malaysians youth actually have. Like, these are the mentality that actually, like, for now they actually have. Like, they're all on like, because other people are doing it and they got away with it, so I can do it as well and things like that. But they don't see in a way that they're actually doing it wrong. They don't even care whether if they're doing it wrong, as long as it gets in their way. Because I think youth today are all about me, myself, and I. Like, I don't care about other stuff. As long as I get what I want, I get my things done, that's it.
Yeah. And that's why I think the personal narrative should change. So, like, just to continue on this story, is that it's fine for people to share these stories to create awareness that corruption exists on such a blatant scale. But do not forget at the end, as I would recommend all my friends to do as well whenever they encounter these problems, is that at the end, make sure that you conclude when you inform others of the story that I did not take it, and I hope all of the others will not take it as well. So don't just mention, it's funny, and then just stop there. The point in which you stop there, again, people think like, oh, it exists, and you didn't do anything about it. But the point in which we vocalize our concerns and disgust about it, that's when people will collectively act and realize that this is something just intolerable.
So, but why do you think they don't actually become vocalized about it? Is it because they're afraid of being judged by others because you didn't do it, or what's the main reason there? Because yeah, they just
I think they're just very oblivious
Mhm.
about this kind of thing. Because I'm actually not from KL, so I'm from Seremban. So the second time I went for my test, I actually didn't pay as well.
Mm.
Because I'm like, no, I'm not. Because my parents didn't want to do it. I'm like, no, it's fine. I thought I can do it. I was like, because at first I really thought it was my problem.
right.
Like, maybe
okay.
I am a bad driver.
If I can pass,
Yeah,
I
so
can
I
pass.
was like, so I was like, okay, you know what, I'll just do another few lessons, and you know what, I mean, it's fine, just take another few lessons. So I did it, and then I passed, like borderline, I passed, but proud driver over here, because I didn't drive. And then when I came to KL to study, because I did my A-levels in Sunway College, because everyone started taking driving lessons during their college times, but I already took it during my SPM, so it sort of surprised them that I failed my first test and I didn't drive, because when everyone was on the hype about getting the license and everything, they were all talking about, hey, how much do you pay? How much do you pay? How much do you pay? And it's so interesting. I'm like
Everyone
it's
is talking
like,
about
are
how
you
much
guys
they
like,
paid
yeah,
for driving.
and they're like, yeah, to pass the driving test. And I'm like, are you serious? They're like, yeah, didn't you pay? I'm like, no, I guess that's why I fail. So it's very sad to see actually that the youth, they just want to do things their way, and they are even openly talking about like who paid more.
So
and
like how Saddiq
like,
said, it's actually
yeah.
become a culture
yeah, it's
already.
like a build-up
Yeah.
culture. Like they'll be like, ha, you paid more, and I paid lesser, but I still passed, and things like that. And I'm like, these are kind of things that you guys actually find it interesting to talk about. Like
That's
seriously.
actually one of the examples we talked about. You know, we can talk about corruptions, but how do you measure corruptions?
Okay.
Mm.
Well, I have the TI
Yeah, you
aspect
should-
of that.
Sure, please
I
go
guess-
ahead.
But I just wanted to throw something in there about, just quickly about this.
Sure.
How to vocalize the youth more. And no, sorry, the issue
Issues.
with why people are really maybe are not vocalizing so much. I think because, I mean, I don't think there's a day that goes by for me where I read something in the news that doesn't relate to corruption or, you know, just general speaking to people, what you see or what you discuss within your family unit or peers. So as a result, maybe there's an element of immunity to it because it is so pervasive that then
Yes.
there's this complacency culture.
You're
this
so tired
mindset,
about
yeah,
it.
Tired. What can we do? Nothing's changing. It's been like this forever. So this is where the role as an individual and just yourself and coming together with like-minded people really needs to have an impact more. To like you said, just spin it on its head and just say, actually, no, because this should never be right. And with the bribing for driving schools and driving tests especially, I think Malaysia has one of the highest rates of road traffic accidents. So there's a direct link there to corruption and the outcome of the reality, which is it can kill, it can impoverish, it can deprive. So
And also to add what Saddiq said about how we youth should make use of the social networks and things like that. But I actually have a story to share, which Jess has already heard it for like the third time.
go ahead.
But she finds
to meet this friend.
She finds this friend very interesting. 'Cause,
Okay,
yeah,
please
so I
share
have
with
this
us.
friend who's very into politics, and so basically he discusses things on his Twitter, and he shares all these
Via his own social network.
Yes,
yeah?
on his social. So he shares all these articles, and he talks about why, because of corruption, this is happening. And he always say that, as Malaysians, you guys have to wake up, fight for your own country, and things like that. And it's so sad because after about because I met him for 4 years already for now, and
right.
throughout the 6 months of our friendship when I just met him, I had people coming to me asking me, do you know this guy? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with him. Like, why? He's like, he's so annoying on Twitter and things like that. I'm like, why? Then they start saying, oh my god, he only talks about politics and stuff like that. And it's so sad because he gets blocked on Twitter by everyone, and then some even unfriended him on Facebook and things like that. But then when I look at what he actually
The contents.
yeah, the contents, it's much more better than this very famous girl of
Emotionally writing
yeah,
down.
really beautiful, or even those Instagram, they have a lot of followers, and
And the
all
vain-
they ever
vain
all their
photos.
vain photos. I'm like, you guys are more interested in someone's branch than your own country's issues, and that's interesting. I'm like, oh my gosh, these are the kind of mentality that you all have. And then they talk about this girl's boyfriend surprising her, and they were like, oh my god, you see the Facebook post yesterday and things like that. But they are blocking people who are actually talking about serious things. So then I have friends telling me, oh no, he's weird, I'm like, but actually he's just into politics and he's discussing really good contents, but you guys are actually blocking him away, like saying that he's annoying, but actually in fact I don't think that was annoying, because I think the part where people just post about their Instagram stuff and like about where are the top 10 branches to go in KL, like for youth today, that is interesting. But from
then,
that I see that's very saddening.
But then
actually.
here, the point he made was social media network. The platforms could be used, very good platform for them to become vocalized
so
and
like
express
my friend,
more.
My
But
friend
then your
is
friends,
vocalized on social network.
yeah, that could work the theory. But then he gets actually blocked by the people. How can he actually influence other group of people?
Yeah, this is what I want to add on. I think one of the biggest reasons, and quite unfortunate, I would love to meet your friend. Quite unfortunate, the point in which you are in the minority, and the vast majority of people are either apathetic or a direct complicit in corruption. It means that you will always be singled out, be seen as the weird one. But that's why it's important to reverse that culture, so that not only his or her friend, it's not only that guy or that girl stands alone, it's that all of us participates and also echoes his concerns as well. Just one more thing to add there is that it's also important for people to realize that corruption is not an issue which is divided based on ideological lines. It's not like only a political issue. It is a universal issue in which there is a clear consensus that it's something which is wrong. I think, as also Jessica rightly pointed out, is that people often think that corruption only involves money and it stops at, yes, I might lose 50 ringgit. But people do not know that the consequence is life-threatening. People die, people live out of poverty for the next 50 years of their life. If people realize the consequences of corruption, I think only then will it hit them that just by staying quiet, to some extent, I'm an indirect complicit into people who are corrupted.
And also looking into like education-wise, where the ones that are probably eligible to get the scholarship to do, I don't know, medicine or anything, are the ones not getting the scholarships, because I heard like you can actually buy your scholarships.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so there are people who are now out there doing dentistry.
Oh my God! I'm sorry. That's very corrupted.
Yeah, like some of them,
So,
even,
and
like
that's just what we know about. Really.
yeah,
Right.
that's what
Right.
we know.
That's
But like
the
they
scary
buy
part.
like,
I know.
cause like I have friends who probably didn't do so well in SPM, and now I see them somewhere outside the world, and I'm like, oh, what's college? Like then I thought, okay, maybe the parents are rich or things like that, and then I realized it was some like scholarships, like the government scholarships and things like that. So it's like, I'm like, okay, I don't think I would dare to go to see a doctor in the future, things like that, because the ones who
The
actually
credibility. They
yes, exactly. Like the ones who actually deserves it don't get it, but the ones that probably didn't even do well in biology or something actually is doing medicine in somewhere else.
Oh no. Well, with that, then how do you actually? I asked shortly before. How do you measure these corruptions then?
Well, I mean, in the case of Transparency International, we do a whole range of indexes and assessments and surveys, really. But in the reality, corruption is something you cannot measure accurately due to its very nature. I think something that we're most famous for, well known for, is the Corruption Perceptions Index, which we release annually. And that's an aggregate index based on expert perceptions and opinions, surveys that are put together, and then it ranks countries between 175 to 177 countries, it changes yearly, on the level of perceived corruption in the public sector. So I'd like to put it out there where everyone thinks Malaysia is, where they ranked in 2014, and actually we asked this to the youth the other day when we had a talk, and the responses were fantastic. 0 being the cleanest, and 100 being like the most basically corrupt, and people that the perception was that Malaysia ranked a lot lower than it did, which says a lot about the impact of perception and really how that in itself is a kind of a cycle in your act. Because corruption is an act, it's a behavior, it's a mentality, isn't it? So that's why it's so complex and so difficult to kind of address and defeat. But another thing we do is the Global Corruption Barometer, which is purely just a perception survey. So it's just talking to members of the public about
Right.
their perceptions of corruption and their willingness to report corruption. So last year, we released the Malaysian Corruption Barometer, and one of the key findings that we found the most concerning was that out of the 2,000 plus respondents that we surveyed, 49% said they were unwilling to report corruption in Malaysia. Yeah, which is, that's massively scary. That's how are we ever going to tackle a problem if no one's ever going to step forward
That's
and
true.
report it to the legitimate avenues that are in place?
And then that links to transparency, isn't it? So, well, I always believe that transparency comes with a clear two-way communication. If one is not open at all, there's no transparency at all. And then that's what exactly been happening in Malaysia. Not only Malaysia, actually, other countries as well. But what can we do to actually overcome this, transparency issues?
So just to
Add
also
on.
address something which Jessica just mentioned just now, especially the youth today, like we have so many things going on, right? And we have so many things to the point that we do not know which one is impacting our lives the most. So even though I think it's disheartening to acknowledge that a lot of Malaysians generally believe that our country is so corrupted to the point that it's beyond relief. However, the fact that now a lot of the youth are thinking that corruption is something which is so significant and does impact their life, that they know about it, that they think that it's something which is remarkably bad, believe it or not, is something which is good. Because that will compel politicians, governments and opposition to ensure that corruption becomes something which is of an electorally determinative issue. So if you look at politics in Malaysia currently, like issues are like, how expensive are your watches? How big of a house do you have? Do you have a swimming pool? All of this are becoming the center issues in politics, which even people of the rural class are also voting based on this. The point in which we are more aware about it, now corruption or the perception of corruption gets pushed up to become a national issue to the point that everyone needs to care about it. And that's what we see. It's not perfect, but we see progress being made where MACC, the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, has been rehauled, even though it's not perfect, but the point in which some changes have been made, the point in which the Prime Minister now no longer has the control to appoint who the person is. Now it goes towards the YDPA. And also we see under the Prime Minister's office now there's a special department to also monitor on corruption. Again, I'm not saying that all of this is perfect, but the point in which we are moving towards a path in which corruption becomes a national issue which everyone's concerned about, it compels people to act. It will not be a perfect process. It is a slow and gradual process, but as even a lot of Western countries went through that process, it is a process which we need to compel all our governments, politicians and opposition to act collectively. That's where all of us must ensure that corruption becomes the most pivotal issue in an election. So I think that's one of the ways in which we can change that culture.
So shall we take another short break here? And then when we return, we will go deeper and then talk about more issues and also perhaps the solution regarding corruption and transparency.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical
Welcome back to
opinions in
DurianASEAN.
Southeast
This is
Asia.
This is Arlene.
Right, so we'll continue our conversation from here. So, Aline, you have some questions, right?
Well, I know you guys already talked about the root cause
Yes, we
of
did.
corruption, but I guess I want to go a bit more deeper on
Sure.
that. As someone that who is also keen on the issue of corruption, I always believe corruption is a symptom; it's not a root cause. And of course, I think the most infamous book would be the book written by Syde Al-Atas on the root cause of corruption. And in your guys' point of view, do you think there's a deeper layer of socio-economic inequality that the government needs to address in order for them to effectively eradicate corruption, at least in a level that is manageable? Because I just give example of countries where the corruption level is very low, are countries where they are much more egalitarian, meaning that there's not so much of social hierarchy between the very rich and the very poor.
But what do you think? Do you think we should be in countries in Scandinavia like Norway and all that?
Yes. I completely agree that social inequity or inequality is one of the driving forces for corruption. But I also believe that corruption is much more complex and it is a multifaceted problem. So, as you rightfully pointed out, definitely the point in which the disparity in income is definitely a concern or a driving force to why people feel compelled to take corruption. However, I think it's also true when people point out that there's no ceiling upon corruption, i.e. like maybe I'll take it because I want to live another day. However, the point in which I live another day and I want to have a great handbag, now I want to have a great car, I want to have a great house, there's no ceiling to it. So I think that's one concern, just to address what you mentioned. The other concern there is to also point out that it is a chicken and egg problem. So it's really like income inequality might be one of the reasons to why people are corrupted. But at the same time, people who are corrupted also drive income inequality through siphoning out billions of dollars. So as a consequence, what I personally believe is that definitely the government should take up more effort in resolving income inequality, but at the same time, it should also be complemented through efforts of suppressing corruption at its core by also running strict laws and also awareness campaigns to ensure that it works. Because I think those two things complement one another and doesn't destroy one another.
So when you say strict law, meaning law that applies to everyone, right?
Definitely.
Not just the smaller fish that just wanting 50 ringgit of corrupted money.
I think all of us here can agree that corruption which hurts us the most, a corruption which happens at the top, in which billions of dollars are being transferred from one hand to another in comparison to 50 ringgit. But I think this is also one thing we need to stress on, is that we shouldn't also adopt an attitude in which we do not accept corruption at the top, but we accept corruption at the bottom. Because the point in which corruption...
But I think the world is happening the other way around.
Yeah. So like,
because we have the highest number, or among the highest in terms of financial illicit flow. A lot of our money are being flown outside of Malaysia. It shows that a lot of the corruption are actually happening on top rather than below.
I agree. That's usually because these are people of power who would have the best of lawyers, best of economic skills to ensure that they can circumvent the law. But as I mentioned before, I think it's unfortunate that people at the top are there, but the point in which we accept corruption at the bottom, it becomes something which is cultural, that people at the bottom and the middle class, when they reach the top, they also think that this is a legitimate avenue for them to make money. So that's why it's important to weed out corruption from all fronts. The point in which one segment of the community is allowed to be corrupted, that incentivizes other segments of the community to jump on the same bandwagon as well.
I want to ask, how do you create the political will to ensure that politicians, have the guts to actually have this law to eradicate corruption? Because, the reason why I ask this, with the recent hike in politicians' salary, do you think it's actually the right way to do it, to make them, earn more so that they will do their job better? Or actually the other way around? What do you think? How can we increase the political will of politicians?
Related to each other?
Yeah, well, that's $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I think, I'm glad you touched upon the political will aspect because, as we were discussing earlier, Malaysia on paper looks fantastic for anti-corruption initiatives. The laws are there, the institutions. In the region of ASEAN, we're looked upon as kind of a standard to aspire towards, but political will is significantly lacking, and that's something that TI...
Even with higher salary of politicians.
Nothing happens overnight.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Addressing corruption issues is it's something that will forever be within, as long as humans exist. I can't speak on behalf of the animal kingdom, but as long as humans exist, it will forever be present. But I know that politicians should be accountable to citizens, but citizens should be as well the driving force pushing for that accountability too. We have the ability to have that say through voting, but that's not enough. We should collectively mobilize. We should speak to our children. We should speak to our elders. We should converse with our peers continuously, and self-reflection as well, I think, is a standard aspect to it. As complex and integral as corruption issues are to society, a lot of it is also about self-reflection of your own actions. It's behavior. So, change doesn't happen overnight, but if enough of us push and make enough noise continuously, day in and day out, in ways that are non-confrontational, but also substantive for ensuring outcome, then things will change.
This is more culturally rooted
in a way that it's hard to just pinpoint one area to say that, by eradicating this, that means we'll solve the corruption issue within the business sector. So how do you actually address this in a way that is more systemic and it's more dealt in a way that it goes down to the bottom of the issue?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned about the kind of culture aspect of it, because I think, again, when you're looking at root causes or, reasons of which lead to corruption prevailing, it's the history of a country and the context is also so key. Patron-client relations, traditionally, were the way people engaged in business, and that, with the open market economy developing, that was normally the way you would ensure security and a way to trade. So these things develop over the course of generations and decades, and it just cannot just be eradicated overnight. And in some contexts, people don't think it should be, or it's a way for survival or maintaining sustenance. So, and in the business sector, in different contexts again, it is just so blatant that, as May's example is, that how can you survive as a business without engaging it in some shape or form? So, there's so many numerous ways to address it. TI-Malaysia, we have our business integrity program, which actually works with corporations, government-linked companies as well, to strengthen their integrity structures, governance structures within their companies, and ensure whistleblowing policies in place.
It is true that.
I came back.
So, just to explain one of the reasons as to why people adopt that culture is because, again, it's game theory. The point in which I don't act in that corrupted way, I will be placed at a disadvantage. As a consequence, my competitors will be in front, therefore I need to also be corrupted first before other people become corrupted and take away my opportunity. But I think in Malaysia, again, it's not perfect, but there have already been structural improvements, i.e. If you are a politician or a minister, or even if you are a top public figure, you are disallowed from taking gifts. Previously, it was cultural and was permitted. Currently, even if the value of the gift, I think, is beyond 500 ringgit, you need to declare it. So the point in which you declare it means that the gift cannot be like a 50,000 ringgit item.
So no more watches. No more free watches.
So there've been improvements or laws which are placed to improve that. But again, at the end, I think all of us did rightfully pointed out, it is a multifaceted problem. Like laws alone without the sufficient political will wouldn't be sufficient to ensure that the push will happen to ensure that corruption stops.
And also, like how you mentioned, no more free watches. It's like it's this kind of incentives that made people go through all these wrong things just for that free watches, that free
all those free items.
Yeah, those free luxury items,
free bags.
So it's very saddening to see like these are the things that actually people would want instead of focusing on better education for the country and things like that. Like I have a lot of very, very well-off friends who are like really wealthy and things like that, and the amount of money they spend is like crazy. And I'm like, why can't you guys just give it to charity and things like that? But what they want is all these materialistic, items and things like that, which is this kind of like, it's because of this materialistic attitudes they have. So in order to reach that, they felt like they need to, like what he said, if he's placed, if he doesn't corrupt, then he's disadvantaged and things like that. So like for their own benefits to live a better life, a luxury life, so then they go on with all this corruption and things like that. So that increases actually the poverty gap as well, and the wealth gap among like the very rich people and like the very poor people. It's just getting bigger and bigger. Yeah. So it's actually very saddening to see this actually happening right in front of you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. How about Jessica? Do you now would like to continue?
You've said it all. But yeah, it was a matter of kind of talking about the initiatives that the government are taking to try and address this issue, of which is one that is very much open and on the table. And there is an example, I think it's the e-procurement website, which they made the effort to put online in a transparent manner.
The Auditor General report as well.
Yeah, open tenders and so forth. But then again, this political will aspect. You look at it; it's not updated.
Yes.
All the details are there. It's pick and choose of what information is available. So it's a commitment to ensure that information and the processes that are clear are followed through, really. And
we can criticize almost all structures which are placed. However, it's better to have those structures in comparison to a world in which those structures are absent. Because as we all criticize it, it means that there's a greater will for politicians and administrators to improve on existing structures to perfect it. But the point is, as I would recommend everyone who's listening to this, like, no matter how much we are hit by corruption, try to not be apathetic. The point in which you're apathetic, we will lose that battle.
That's right.
So just always vocalize our concerns. We are not living in a perfect world, but as time passes by, we will perfect that world in whatever way we can.
I was about to go to the question where do you have any messages to our listeners, and I think you already made a point there. Yeah, you did. And at the same time, this conversation is very interesting, coming from the both of you's point of view and as well as from the Jessica. But unfortunately, we have reached the end of our session here, and here is their final thoughts and messages.
One thing which everyone should understand is that corruption does not benefit you. You might think at that point in time where you bribe the police officer for 15 ringgit it will benefit you, but that's only a short-term perspective. Acknowledge that the point in which you feed into that corrupted practice, it means that in the future, when your mom needs to go to a hospital and want to use the facilities, the facilities might not be that good. The line might be longer. Lives will be lost. If you benefit at that short period of time, in the future when you want to renew your passport or when you want to bring in someone else to the country, it will become much harder because of your initial practice. Hopefully people will understand that corruption is not only about a small monetary transaction, and the largest scheme is billions of dollars being swindled out, people being locked into a life of poverty, people imprisoned into that culture till the point that lives are lost. This is not a small issue. It is a national issue in which all of us should unite behind to vocalize our concerns, an issue which impacts not only you but me as well. Hopefully we'll stand united behind it.
Right. How about May?
Well, I'm not so. I think the way Saddiq said it is like, whoa,
campaign speech
right
there.
Got my vote.
Yeah. I think for me it's like just don't give up on this, and I know a lot of people are always the ones talking the most, but they are the ones that act on the least. You know, they can only know how to complain, and they can only criticize, and they can only, you know, anything that, regardless government or NGOs, even they bring up some things like everything, or they try to put in an effort to, you know, combat something. There's always someone who is very skeptical about it. Like, you know, like, stop complaining, you know, try to, like, in your, even if you can't really be a part of like some organization to fight corruption, but in your daily lives you can always choose not to be corrupted. And it's very famous John Maynard Keynes, he speaks about short-term and long-term things, and in his opinion he said that in the long term everyone's just gonna die anyway, so what's the point of focusing on policies that concentrates on long term? So he made a point in a way that now that we are still alive and in the short term, and we can have good policies and we can build on, like, you know, better prospect and things like that, it will lead to, even though it's ambiguous or uncertain, but it would at least, you know, that your effort in towards this short term will actually leads to like a better culture or a community. So it's like a spider web effect where it goes well. Like if you plan well, everything goes well. So like that kind of thing. So I think for now, if you know you still have the chance, I think everyone should come up, you know, and fight against corruption, because if you fight now and then you can in the future provide a better future for your future generations.
Right.
Yeah.
I think a key message is, like, don't ever feel like you're in a position to not make a choice. I think that is it. Like, empower yourself as you are empowered with that ability to make a decision. And as well, I really hope they feel inspired by just listening to these two here. None of us have gone through any special training, got any special qualifications. This is literally just about being aware and concerned citizens who really want to see a better country, a better future for our families and our loved ones. So, on that note, I really hope people can come next Saturday and, watch, champions like Saddiq in action and, May and Nick and Ken who are driving this as the youth ambassadors to really show the potential of what the youth have and will do.
Right, so thanks for the reminder. Yes, it will be held on the April 25th at Taylor's College. What time?
Lakeside Campus, 2 to 5 p.m.
All right.
Oh, and there'll be lots of activities alongside that. So, pledge board and doing a little kind of social media campaign.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
will there be any gifts?
Will you only come if there is, Ali? The free food, yes. Yeah, exactly.
So our Durian listeners, be there, participate, and then speak up and voice it out. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.